We're going to stick with the rugby. Mike McCarthy, former Ireland lock forward, is on the line. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Morning, Dave. How are you doing? Good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm very well. I think we're all just looking to build a little positivity after what we witnessed in Geneva last night. If the Republic of Ireland senior football team isn't going places anywhere soon, we're hoping that maybe the rugby team can do something for us this weekend. Just on where they are personnel-wise going into this game, Mike, you were called into the squad in 2015 after the French game when Paul O'Connell tore his hamstring, and we'd lost so many players. I know you were only with the group for a few days, but what was the atmosphere like that week in the build-up to the Argentinian game on the back of losing Paul, Shawnee, Johnny Sexton, O'Mahony, Jared Payne was already out. It's a fully fit squad this time around. I would imagine the circumstances are so wildly different.
Yeah, and that's massively important, because in a quarter-final you need to firstly play at your best, and you need to have a bit of luck as well. And as you mentioned there, that France game, the last game in the pool stages, it was great performance against a really good French side back then. And then we lost those key six players. Tommy Bowe was another one you didn't mention as well. So yeah, I got called into camp for a week after that horrific injury Paul O'Connell got, and you just, as soon as you go in, it's just you kind of sense, it's like going into a pressure cooker, walking into the hotel. Lads are on edge. Obviously, it means so much. It's very tense. There's a lot on the line, and the guys just want to get the game played as quickly as possible. They're just itching to get out there and play. So, but it's really exciting. Ireland haven't played New Zealand in a World Cup since, I think, 1995. And listening to Justin Marshall there, about the weather, I think if it is raining, that definitely does suit Ireland. Physically up front, I think New Zealand will be scared of that front row there. The All Blacks front row there, I think their props on that experience compared to the likes of Cian Healy and Rory Best and Tyg Furlong. Bestie's probably the best scrummaging hooker in the world. So they'll be frightened by that, and I think Ireland just need to really start the game well. I think back in 2016, 2018, I think one area Ireland really got on top of them was the maul attack. We scored, definitely in Chicago, we scored an early try in the maul where we just we dominated them up front. It set the tone for the game, and I think if we have a really good start, like we saw against Scotland, like we saw against Samoa, where we win the kicking battle, we get a penalty, we kick to the corner, and we have a really well worked move against Samoa and Scotland. That was a kind of a shift drive to the front corner. I think I imagine it'll be a shift drive to the back this time, but I think a good start and win that physicality, win that battle, we'll be in a good place.
So every facet of the game that you've gone through there, Mike, set piece, small, kicking game, scrum, it all points towards the sort of tight game that we need it to be in order to beat New Zealand, and the opposite of what Brian O'Driscoll was saying there at the Morgosh Energy Theatre, that if it gets loose and fast and stretched, that's the sort of game that we don't really have a chance of winning against the All Blacks. What can we do to ensure that is how the game does play out?
Yeah, well, I mentioned set piece, and for me, I said before the tournament started, with with Dev Toner not being involved, our lineout's been fantastic. I think we've got a 94% success rate. Rory Best is, I think, second most successful thrower in the tournament so far. But for me, I said from the start, my concern would be is having no Dev Toner for a quarter final when you're playing like a team that has got a specialist lineout. Now, New Zealand do have a specialist lineout there. When we're going to have to be switched on, not just in our attack, but our defence. New Zealand, they come into the line, when New Zealand are throwing in, it's a very fast line out, a faster line out than you'll see any other team do. They walk into the line out and literally throw the ball in as soon as they get to the line. So we can't switch off. They'll be prepping that all week in terms of, if they kick to the corner, running back, getting set first, being ready, being early, being switched on, numbering up. So that's really important. But I think, like you said, just that domination of set piece, the foundation, scrum, the maul defense, and then winning the collisions, winning the inches. That pick and go game. We just need that foundation from the front five up front, and I think everything else will follow. Great to have Robbie Henshaw back. Obviously, Bundy is a big loss, but having Robbie back, the experience and that edge and physicality he brings, and making incredibly good reads in defence as Gary Ringrose does as well. hopefully they'll, you can't give the All Blacks time on the ball, so hopefully they'll be up in the All Blacks' faces. And Andy Farrell's got a very good success rate against New Zealand. I think he's beaten them 4 times in the past. So I'm confident we're going to have a really good performance. Possibly Joe's last game, possibly Bessie's last game. It's a World Cup, it's a quarter-final, it's against the All Blacks. I think we're going to see Ireland back to, Joe spoke about the World Cup, the warm-up games as well, about periodisation. And, after that England game, you kind of maybe thought it was a bit of a cop-out, but, I fully believed it. He mentioned the word periodisation, and it was all about peaking for a quarter-final. We had a great performance against Samoa, 50 minutes with 14 men. And I think it's going the right direction for the quarter final.
You played in that 2013 defeat to New Zealand. Mike, apologies for bringing that up. I know it's still probably a painful experience to even contemplate, but firsthand that any mistake, as they proved in that last 10 minutes, is just ruthlessly punished. They don't ask another second question. How do Ireland go about getting that error-free display that Peter O'Mahony has been talking about defensively, that you just don't give them the avenues down which to attack? You just make sure that if they're going to score a try against you, it's going to have to be something very special.
Yeah, I think, from that 2013 game, that's 100% a game we should have and could have won. But the great thing was the learnings were taken forward from that with the wins in 2016, 2018. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't involved in those games. But 2013, we were complete control. And, Nigel Owens, who's ref in the game again this week, gave a penalty away he warned us. We were trying to slow the ball down, keep the picking and going. And Nigel warned us, I think, a couple of times about coming off our feet at the breakdown. And probably naivety, lack of experience in those big, massive games. Finally someone penalised for coming off their feet. And, the game was won. It was the clock was done, and the All Blacks showed their class. They kept the ball for 4.5 minutes. That's definitely the most exhausted 4.5 minutes I've ever played at that pace. They're just relentless. They're ruthless. They just back themselves. And mentally, if you switch off, if you clock off, you get punished. You look back to that first pool game against South Africa, and when New Zealand played South Africa, and for me, South Africa completely dominated. I can't remember, it was the first 20, 30, maybe even 40 minutes. New Zealand had hardly any possession, and then yet they won the game comfortably. I think playing in not even in top gear. So anything gets punished. So mentally, you've got to be completely switched on. Your discipline has got to be incredibly good. That game in Chicago, our discipline was incredible. At the Aviva in 18, it was incredible. Because if your discipline's good, you're giving them as little amount as possible of access points into the game. So that's a big area as well, discipline.
Yeah, we've only conceded 2 tries as well, so our defence seems to be going reasonably well. Is it the South African performance, is that the one that would worry you most from an Irish point of view, given that they pretty much absorbed everything that South Africa threw at them, and they really took it to New Zealand in that opening quarter, and they've since had another month together. They've had more time to kind of get their combinations going again after a break from each other, with Barrett at 15 and Moanga settling in further at 10, and they've got Brodie Retallick back fully fit. That a month later, having been in camp in Japan and going through the gears, that they're actually going to be better again than they were against the Springboks.
Yeah, that's probably the case. The more time they have together, I think they're pretty good in terms of injuries. So we mentioned Robbie Henshaw for us. Brodie Retallick, as you said, for New Zealand, he's a massive player for them. He didn't play against Ireland in Chicago, and he was a big loss. Their line-out malfunction, their set-piece malfunction without him playing. He's got a massive engine, gets through a huge amount of work. He's a talisman in terms of the unseen work he gets through. And with New Zealand's game being cancelled last week, I know they would have liked to have given him I think he's only had 30 minutes since he's come back from his injury, so they would have liked him to have more time. But he's massive for them to have on the team sheet, so that's a big plus for them. But yeah, of course, the longer they've been together, they've been building momentum. They're looking ruthless. I know one game they got a dressing down at half-time from Hansen. So, yeah, they're looking incredibly dangerous.
You mentioned Hansen there. The usual utterings have been coming from the New Zealand camp this week. He always likes to fire a couple of grenades into the mix in the build-up to a game. Always good copy. They said they were keen to avoid Japan, so they were happy enough for that to have happened. Coles has been saying that the recent record against Ireland means nothing, that there's absolutely nothing to fear from a New Zealand point of view when they take on Ireland. Are you among those that believe that the inferiority complex that Ireland had now is completely gone, and that New Zealand do have something to fear, that of all the teams maybe that they could have come up against, we're the side that have had their number over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, Joe's completely changed the mindset of the Irish team. They'll be in that camp now, and to people outside the camp, they'll be thinking, we've got a chance of winning, but it's a very small chance. But the lads in camp will honestly 100% believe that they can go out and win this game. They'll know they need to be at their best. They'll know they'll need a little bit of luck on the day, but there'll be full belief within that camp. And Joe's completely changed the mindset. I think previously, before Joe was in charge, I think Ireland were probably at their best when no one gave them a chance and their backs to the wall. That's not the case now with Joe. He's completely changed that. So the lads will be confident they can cause an upset, and they'll be excited, looking forward to it, and relishing the prospect of this game. Before
we leave you go, Mike, let's just look at the personnel and who you feel will be starting this game. There's some quotes from Peter O'Mahony in this morning's papers, and he's saying that this is going to be the biggest game of his life, which is a little bit of a hint that he's probably going to start, because I think there was a little bit of debate around the back row and the makeup of the back row. Would Tadhg Beirne retain his place? For example, would Peter O'Mahony stay at 6? What are your thoughts on the makeup of that scrum? I assume the 7 of the 8 places for you are locked down. It's just a question of whether Peter O'Mahony gets in at blindside again.
Yeah, I think. I mean, the two that have been spoken about is Rob Kearney and Pete. But I think Joe, he'll go with experience. He'll go. He knows those guys deliver on the big stage when it really matters. I remember back to 2016, but I remember there was huge questions asked about Rob Kearney starting. I think maybe his form hadn't been as good as it normally was, and Joe just backed him. And as Rob does, he completely delivered, was probably man of the match in that game in Chicago. So I think Joe will know that in the back of his head. I think he'll start Rob. I think he'll start Pete. And, like I mentioned, without having Dev there for a quarter final, the importance of the line out, Tadhg Beirne's incredibly good in the line out. But I think just in terms of that leadership side of things, Pete, the one-man lift at the front in defence, that's hugely important, because it allows you to put 2 fully lifted pods, middle and back, put at maximum pressure on the New Zealand throw. I mean, the last thing you want to be doing is giving them easy ball. You don't. Ideally, you want to be forcing them to win the ball at the front. So the pass from the 9 to 10 is the ball's in the air longer, so you can get more line speed. I think for Pete's kind of leadership qualities around the pitch, but mainly around the line out, I think he will start, and I think Rob will start also.
Finally, Mike, we heard from Justin Marshall there. He predicted a 12 to 15 point New Zealand victory. Depending on who you look at, the spread is somewhere between 12 and 15 with the bookmakers. Will we beat that spread? And if so, how close might we go to winning the game?
Yeah, sorry, you were asking me for a prediction here, are you? I always get...
As far as you're willing to go on it, yeah.
Well, if it's raining, I think we'll win. I'll go 21-18. If it's dry, I fully believe we're going to win. I think we're going to win. If it's dry as well, I think we'll win. Let me go. Let me think. Let me go 27-23.
That's a quarter-final classic, that sounds like. Mike, brilliant stuff. Thanks a million.
Guys, thank you very much.
Mike McCarthy predicting an Irish victory whether it rains or not.